Hey everyone, welcome back to Students of Storage. I'm your host, Tully. Today we have Chris Michaels from the Storage Rebellion. We had a really good conversation around his early investments, mistakes that people typically make early on, and what does long-term success look like when utilizing a community. Cool. Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining me today. Have obviously had a long, outstanding relationship with the Storage Rebellion and yourself, doing a lot of great work for the storage community. But would love to have you share a little bit more about your background, what got you into self-storage, and kind of what is it that you're providing?
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, thanks so much for having me on with you guys. I'm excited for our conversation today. And yeah, I started getting into self-storage back in 2018. And, funny enough, back then, there was an individual named Mike Wagner, who a lot of folks know, who started the Storage Rebellion. And I started working alongside him. I'd always been really interested in real estate investing. And then I started learning more about storage. And I got really interested in it. I actually started working alongside Mike, just helping him do things within the company. I wasn't really a storage expert by any means. Didn't really know anything about storage, but was very interested in it. And then in 2019, I actually started investing in storage myself, not because I had it all figured out. In fact, back in 2019 was completely broke, behind on our bills, credit card bills. And I turned to storage as a vehicle to get me out of that financial stress. And thankfully, and God willing, I actually found my first deal about 7 days or so after getting started, and did a wholesale deal, which was my first wholesale deal, first storage anything. Got myself out of debt, and it really opened my eyes to the world of self-storage, how powerful it is, what you can achieve with this asset class in a short amount of time. And so went on to go do my second deal like 2 or 3 months later, and then we did a third deal. And so as time has gone on, kind of worked myself up in the company, that's Storage Rebellion. And then last year, Mike Wagner ended up stepping out to go pursue some other things that he's been feeling called to. He's still investing in storage. He's just not teaching storage anymore. And so I ended up taking over the company. And over the last year, we've been really growing fairly quickly. We've been incorporating a whole lot of new elements to what we provide and how we support people. It's been honestly an incredible ride. It's been a lot of fun. We have multiple groups that we're growing right now and helping people get into storage. And so it's a quick high level overview. I'm sure we'll get deeper into the weeds on some of this.
Yeah, no, what an incredible story, right? Like bootstrapped, but finding additional resources, finding a community, executing on those deals, and, look at where you're at today. Pretty impressive. What would you say was maybe some of the biggest learnings that you had early on that kind of like motivated you to continue down that path of acquiring the second facility, especially in such a short time?
Yeah. So back in 2019, like things looked a little different than they do today, right? Like it's a lot more competitive now. Back then, I found that first deal that I found was after I sent out about 40 Facebook messages to property owners, right? And I found a deal that way. The second deal I had sent out less than 200 mailers and had a handful of people call me back. One of them turned into a deal. The same thing happened with the third one. And so like finding deals back then, I think was a bit easier than it is today. Like things have changed, right? The market's changed. Properties are really overpriced right now. Not to say there's not good deals out there. There certainly is, but it's more competitive. More people want to get into the space. And so it was a little bit easier at that time, I'll say. Now, when I say easier, what I mean is you could do a little bit of work and get some luck out of it, right? Today you have to be a lot more consistent. You really have to be showing up. But that first wholesale deal we did was a $60,000 check. Like back then I wasn't even making that much money in a year, let alone finding a deal in 7 days and then closing on it 90 days later. Like that was incredible for me. And so it really opened my eyes. And also I had the opportunity to work within the Storage Rebellion. And so I saw people collecting these checks for $800,000, $1 million, $1.5 million. And I was like, how is this possible, right? Because from an outsider looking in, it didn't look like they were working all that hard, and so it really intrigued me, and I became really fascinated, somewhat obsessed with the potential that it had, and so that I think was the biggest eye opener for me. But biggest lessons learned were one, you just have to be willing to show up and do the work, and then two, and this, I think this happened to me, but this happens to a lot of new folks, right? Like getting into this for the first time, you're going to experience self-doubt, limiting beliefs. You're going to be a little bit scared at times, and not leaning into that is very important, right? And so like it's very easy for us to become consumed with our own thoughts and the pressure that we feel. Um, it becomes a lot easier to navigate those when you put yourself into community and you're around others who have walked this path. And instead of just kind of dwelling on that, right? And maybe talking yourself out of a good deal, which I almost did at one point. We could talk more about that later. Um, Bringing that immediately to somebody else who has that experience. You're like, hey, here's what I'm looking at. Here's kind of my worries about the situation. And having somebody walk you through that allows you to move so much faster, because you don't just sit there and dwell and like, what if I screw up? What if I make the wrong offer? What if I step into a bad deal? Then what happens, right? And I see a lot of new investors get consumed by these thoughts and these, limiting beliefs, if you will. But having somebody to go to or a community to go to is so, so important, especially if you're brand new at this. And then I've learned multiple lessons, throughout ownership and things like that. But I'll let you kind of drive where you want to go next with it.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I think, looking at exactly like what was going on in 2019 is completely different than what's going on in 2026, right? We've seen not only super high valuations, but also, right, a ton of new builds.
Yeah.
Historically, groups that wouldn't have come into the market uh, in a secondary or tertiary market starting to appear or rear their heads.
Hmm.
There's a ton of third party management groups, right? Like, so it can feel almost impossible, if not like totally overwhelming, to actually move forward and execute and find those deals. So maybe kind of like walk us through, like, what are some of the things that people should kind of think about, right? You talked about you know lessons learned, but how would somebody put their foot in the water and then obviously um, you know get the agency to actually follow through?
Yeah. So I I typically, and this is kind of how I encourage folks to do it as well, is like, don't try to figure everything out at once and then think that like, well, once I figure it all out, then I'll go and do it. Then I'll take action. Like, just figure out what the first step is and then start taking action on the first step. And when you get to the next bridge, then you figure out how to cross that bridge. I see a lot of people who get stuck in information overload. They kind of sit back and they think, well, when I learn enough, then I'll feel more confident. And when I feel more confident, I'll go take action. But it doesn't actually work that way, right? And I sometimes use the analogy of like sports. So if we think about golf, for an example, like you could study Tiger Woods' golf swing for years on end, but that's not going to make you a good golfer until you go out and you start playing golf and figuring it out for yourself. And so it's definitely helpful to learn as much as you can, but then understand when it's time to go out and take action. Don't worry about like, you know, due diligence and ownership and how am I going to manage this property once I have it one day? Like, don't worry about that right now. Just figure out, how do I find a deal? What does a good deal look like? And start going out and looking for those deals, right? There's a handful of ways to do it. Google Maps, TractIQ, go to listed sites, Crexy, whoever, talk to brokers, but just go have those conversations, start looking at properties. And the more you do that, like anything else, you start to learn more about it. You find these rhythms and these patterns, and you start to see how things operate, how people respond to certain things. And then once you have one that looks like a deal, now we can figure out the next step, right? Well, putting an offer together, figuring out the funding for it. And I also see like a lot of folks kind of get hung up in well, I can't go out and look for a deal until I know how to fund that deal. But that's somewhat backwards. I would say go find the deal first and then the money will follow, because once you have a deal, like, that's an opportunity, right? So if you have an opportunity, there's people who want to invest their money into that opportunity. And so just get good at finding deals and then everything else will start to fall into place. So that's a big lesson too, right? So like, don't get stuck just consuming content. Go out, take action. And then as far as like some other lessons learned, I know some folks get really nervous to have those conversations. I did as well, and that's why I talk about it. But having those conversations with sellers, they they don't really know what to say. And I'm speaking to the new investors here. Uh, they don't know how to have those conversations. They think they need to sell themselves, and you actually don't have to do that at all. I would encourage you not to do that. And when I started cold calling for the first time, and I'll be honest, when I first got started, I told you on that second deal, I was just sending out letters. And one of the reasons I was sending out letters as opposed to cold calling was because I was afraid of cold calling. And so by the third deal, that was actually a cold call. I started to kind of figure out how to do it a bit more. And one of the things that helped me, and I share this with others, is like, don't think you have to get on the phone and sell yourself. Just learn about the seller, right? So try to learn more about them and find out those common similarities and figure out what it is they're trying to achieve. They're trying to sell a property for a reason, right? Whether it's they're in a stressful situation, they want to retire, maybe they want to go invest in something else, maybe somebody's sick, dying, you don't know. But figuring out what their motivation is and then helping them, genuinely helping them and trying to create a win-win scenario is probably the biggest and best piece of advice. Building that relationship and then just learning as much about them as you can and learning as much about the property as you can. Like, don't try and sell them on, I've done X amount of storage deals and, this and that. They don't care. Like, they really don't. They have a problem and they want to know, hey, can this person help me fix that problem? And so, and people also do business. And I mean, this as well. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. And so if you could build that relationship and they learn more about you, they like you, they trust you, and they see that you genuinely have their best interests in mind, they're going to want to do deals with you. So I think that's huge. And then being patient, as far as like a majority of the people you talk to aren't going to be ready to sell right now. And that's okay, because that relationship will pay off down the road. Maybe it's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now. Maybe it's 2 years from now. But having a good follow-up process and continuing to build that relationship throughout the years is huge, because it's always timing and circumstances, right? Like, everybody's going to sell at some point, and who they go to sell that property to is typically the person who has shown the most interest, the person they know well and they trust well. And so hopefully that's helpful information.
No, super helpful. And I think like an area that I want to go a little bit deeper on is like rejection. Like, it could feel, especially in that first outreach, for like, hey, I'm not looking to sell, right? Like, so in building that relationship and in your follow-up process, what has been like some of the cadences or like topics in which you've kind of furthered that relationship and allowed you to kind of like consistently reach out on an ongoing basis? Or like, do you even have to necessarily have that relationship? Is it the thoughtful persistence that actually gets you where you need to be?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the thoughtful persistence of it all. If I get somebody on the phone who's just like, yeah, no, I'm not looking to sell, or it's not the right time for me to sell, I usually would just find a way to continue that conversation somehow, right? So instead of just hanging up and moving on and never talking to them again, I might say something like, "Oh, okay, that's absolutely no problem. I totally get it. By the way, how long have you owned this storage facility?" And they might say, "Well, been running it for the past 20 something years. It was my parents before that." Oh, cool. How's business been for you guys? Right. So we're just looking for these ways to open up the conversation in some way to then eventually take us down a deeper path. And you can even get to know their family a little bit more and be like, well, do you have kids? Do you plan on selling it to them one day or passing on the business? Some will say yes, no. Oh, cool. Do your kids participate in the business right now? Right. And then what you could do from there is like follow up 2 or 3 months later, and maybe you learned something about one of their kids, right? And just like you wanted to shoot over a thoughtful response. I was talking to somebody who had a kid who recently broke their arm, and so I followed up about a month later. I was like, hey, you know, we're working on a deal that kind of reminds me of the one that you guys have, and had me thinking about your son. Hope everything's going well with his injury there, right? So it's just like these little thoughtful responses here and there, and then doing the check-in. Hey, how's business been going? Was thinking about you recently, and then kind of ending it with like, if anything ever changes for you in the future, or if you happen to know somebody who's selling, I'd be happy if you'd keep me in mind, right? I don't recommend starting the conversation every time you follow up with, hey, just checking in to see if you've considered selling yet. Like that does get old, and after a while they'll start to kind of push you aside. In my experience, that's what I've seen, and I've heard others share that as well. The people who have the best relationships are the ones who win.
Yeah. Yep. Super helpful advice. I think, again, to your point, picking up the phone, doing the cold calling, that's how you got your third deal. Just the thoughtful persistence, right? Like just be human, right? If you're eager and you're enthusiastic and you want to learn, right, and you see an opportunity, the best way to present yourself is exactly how you kind of shared. So, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Shifting a little bit, like I'm curious, like the storage rebellion community is pretty large, right? But it may not be necessarily for everybody. So who is kind of like an ideal, partner, since you guys kind of view yourselves as such, like to collaborate with?
Yeah, so it is the question, when would be a good time to consider jumping into the storage rebellion?
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate way of
Yeah,
looking at it.
I gotcha. So we typically, we try to help as many people as we can. So we have everything from people who are brand new, they're just trying to figure this out for the first time, or maybe even they're just kind of, this sounds really interesting, I want to explore it a bit more, all the way to people who are looking for support closing their first deal, and then people who have multiple facilities and they're scaling their storage businesses. So we have three different groups. Each is catered to a specific individual, and I'll kind of walk through them very quickly, and then if you have other questions, we can dive into it. But our main platform, right, the Storage Rebellion community, is typically where we send brand new investors. So like, you don't know the first thing, but hey, I really want to get started in this. Go over to the network. It's super affordable. You'll get access to like a community of investors who are on the same journey. There's also very experienced investors in that community as well. And we have some trainings, and then we do a weekly Q&A support call. So every Tuesday we do a live call, and you could bring all your questions to the table. So if you're trying to figure out what a deal is, or what types of deals to look for, or if you're getting ready to, maybe close on a deal or make an offer, whatever it is, every single week you get support. You can bring those questions to the table, and we have coaches walking folks through those challenges or questions that they have. And then we have a first close program, which is actually, we've ran this program in the past, and this year what we decided to do was completely revamp it. And one of the reasons for that is we changed who we wanted to serve within that community. And so we're actually really excited about this group. This one is launching in September. We're taking in applicants right now. It's an application process. And there's several seats open right now, but it's a small focused group. I believe it's going to be max at like 15 or 20 people. And this is a more hands-on support group. There's 2 coaching calls every month and a handful of other things. But this is specifically for the folks who are like, I understand the basics, and I really want somebody to hold my hand all the way to the closing process. It's typically for folks who want to close their first deal in 3 to 9 months. And then within that group as well, we'll also help you not just close that first deal, we're also going to help you scale from there. So we want to help you get that first deal, but also the second and third deal. And then beyond that is our insiders group. And I think I mentioned earlier, this is for more of the elite players. Like, you already have a portfolio, you're scaling your storage business. We do 2 events every year. I know you guys came to our last one in Orlando, which was a great time. And it's for folks who want to continue scaling, but not at the expense of their freedom. And so you've probably seen this as well. Like people grow a business and then they start working in the business more than they're working on the business. So it's for those elite players who are really looking to scale, and in the process of scaling, also generating more freedom.
Awesome. So it sounds like there's room for everybody, right? From the
Yeah.
general community to kind of get a sense of what is going on, ask some questions, get some immediate feedback to individuals who want to purchase their first facility, right?
Yep.
And want some guided assistance to crossing that finish line all the way up to um, the group that I had the pleasure of hanging with down in Orlando
Hmm.
for some of the larger operators, right?
Yep.
Uh, who've got, 10, 15, 20 plus facilities. And yeah, there's a lot to be said for having that community. So awesome. Um, as somebody who's never owned self-storage, right? I'm on
Yeah.
the tech side. Walk
Oh
us
yeah.
through like what happens after that, like the day after closing. What are some of like the like knee-jerk reactions? Like I imagine it's kind of like a double-edged sword. There's a ton of excitement,
Hmm.
a lot of nervous energy, but what do you typically see?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. There's definitely a lot of excitement, and then there's that holy crap moment where it's like, well, I just bought this property. I have all of these things that I need to do now. And so typically, I try to make things as easy as possible. And so, like, if you're buying, for an example, a value add facility, when you do your site visit during your due diligence period, like already going into that property, you should have a pretty good idea of some of the things that need to get done, some of the changes that are going to be had to be made. And so start figuring out different contractors and things like that to call to help you with these things and have them meet you on site during your due diligence. Because once you start lining all of that up ahead of time, then day one, you step into ownership. These folks can just start doing what they have to do. And so last deal I did in South Carolina, I did that same thing. And so like I had the contractors showing up to do the work on the day of closing, but they were like, they're starting work first thing in the morning. So it's like 8 in the morning. They're at the property and I'm not signing the papers, I think, till 11 or 12. And I'm like, I'm definitely buying the property, but it's probably safer you wait until I sign the papers before you guys start tearing things up. And so, right when I signed, I texted them. I'm like, yeah, you guys are good to go. And so we started getting some renovations done, fence work done, security stuff, and that made it really easy because I was on site, closed at the actual table, even though you can do virtual closes if you want. But did that. Then I was able to go to the property, see what was going on, talk with the contractors. Then I went back to my whole hotel room because I bought this one out of state. And then it's just like getting everything transferred, right? Like getting everything into your management software, sending out your tenant letters. There's a new ownership letter, and then if you're doing security at the property, send out a letter for that, like new security, things like that. Um, Calling the different companies, electric, phone, getting everything moved over to you. So like every deal's different, obviously, right? So it varies, but yeah, it's essentially just getting everything onboarded and then transferred over to you. And then from that point, we're just looking at like, if you have a value add facility, we're looking at what are the first things that really need to get done with this property. Typically for us, it's contacting the tenants, letting them know what's going on, moving people into the software, getting them hopefully enrolled in auto pay. And then from there, we're just looking to optimize the facility. What needs to change? What are the updates that need to be had? Start pushing some marketing out there, bringing in new tenants. And, it's once it definitely feels overwhelming the first time. I know I was really overwhelmed. Thankfully, I had people to lean on. But the first one that I stepped into ownership on, it there's definitely a little bit of overwhelm that comes to it. And then once you go through the process the first time, you're like, oh, okay. Like a lot of that stress was because this was like brand new and I was afraid of what I might be missing, right? But once you go through that process, it's a lot easier the second time around. You start to develop this rhythm where you could just knock this stuff out fairly quickly. And then you could just start focusing on the management side, in optimizing the property. Um, but yeah, it's really just kind of figuring out everything that's going to have to be done ahead of time so that when you step in ownership day one, you can just hit the ground running.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. What would you say is like, what do people typically overlook when doing that due diligence that they should be mindful of, like when walking a property?
Yeah. That's a great question. There's a handful of things to be mindful of. We typically look at like one of the questions that I ask myself anytime I'm buying a property, and I like to buy, I don't own anything close to home. I like buying in the South. And so, like, I have to travel to get there. And so, when I travel there, I'm very diligent about everything, right? Because I want to do it in as least amount of trips as possible. And so I'm typically looking for what are some deal killers here? Is there anything that hasn't been disclosed? Is there anything that could kill this deal? And so a lot of things that I'm looking at are like, one is roof issues. I'll try to grab a ladder if I can, get on top of the roof, or get on top of my car and get on top of the roof. We're looking for like water issues, big things like that, right? And so if there's units that are open, get inside of those units, see what the interior looks like. Um, that's really helpful. And then also, as you walk that property, look for where where is all of the water going to drain here, right? And if it's moving in a good direction, it's not moving into the units. That's a really good sign, because that can cause a lot of issues for you down the road. And then like break-ins, things like that. We looked at a property and they had said, there's, as far as we know, there's not any break-ins or anything like that. And then I visited the property, fence is ripped open, there's a carpet thrown over the barbed wire so somebody could climb it. Somebody was living in a unit. And these are all things where like, oh, okay, this might be an issue, right? But really the only reason why those things were an issue was like, they didn't have the right setup. So there was no security cameras. There was no automated gate system. It just nobody was keeping an eye on it. Like there was a 75-year-old woman who was managing it. She had all of the tenant information in a recipe box, right? It's like these are the types of properties you talk to, and you're like, yes, I want more of these because these are typically the opportunities. But those are just a handful. But also, if you can talk to some of the locals, talk to like the police. Hey, what do you know about this area? I'm looking to buy a facility located here. What does crime typically look like? What do you guys see in this area? All of that's really helpful information. But yeah, I'm looking at all of those things, right? Break-ins, water issues, a big thing for me. Roof. I also want to see how this facility. Well, two things here. So the first one is I want to see how people get in and around the facility. Because if it's a pain in the butt, like that's going to cause issues for you down the road. We had one property that had 3 gates, and we don't know why they set it up this way. So like, depending on which unit you were at, you would have to access a different gate. And there wasn't really a turnaround process. Like you would have to shoot straight through the property and then typically reverse your way out. And so that I think was kind of an annoying process. So we changed things a bit. We created one centralized entry and exit, and then created a turnaround section so people could go through the entrance, navigate through the property, turn around easily, and exit. But I think that's a big one to look at. Is like, how are people going to get around your property? If it's a pain in the butt, people they're not going to rent there, right? There's another facility down the street who offers the same product, and if it's easier, more convenient, easier to rent, all of those things, they're more likely to go there. And so that's one of them. And then the other one, what was I going to say? The other one was so exit. where is your facility in correspondence with where you believe your majority audience is, or your majority tenants, right? So like traveling to the facility, how do they do that? If it's a lot easier for folks to get to the competitor, then they're probably going to go there. However, if they're more centralized to where you are, you're visible, all of those things, those are all helpful pieces of data.
Yeah. Super helpful insight there. Let's talk more on like the tech side. You talked about like TractIQ for
Yeah.
finding deals, right? What should people be looking to find these types of deals? Obviously, the community is great, but yeah, it's helpful to understand like the tech side of it when doing that due diligence. So
Yeah. So a couple different things as far as like tech stuff. And are you more so all tech, or are you kind of referring just to locating deals or management or what?
I think it'd be interesting to walk through and get an understanding of how people locate, find
Yeah.
deals, and then that feels like a natural segue to go towards talking about like, when you get a pen and paper facility, what should you be mindful of?
Sure.
Where do you take the tech? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So for me, I mean, there's a number of different things you could do, right? As far as tech goes for locating storage deals, I'm not like in on all of these different softwares. Like, granted, there's a lot of things you can do. I don't think there's really an excuse anymore for like, I don't know where to go to find a deal. Like, there's there's opportunities everywhere. Um, like if you're just getting started for the first time, just start poking around on Google Maps. Start doing searches for storage in your area. But like places like TractIQ are really helpful. And we're friends with Noah, one of the co-founders there. Really, he's a great dude. And one of the things that Tract does well is like they have a pretty good data system where I think they're tracking over 97% or so. Don't quote me on that, but it's the majority of the storage facilities in the United States. And so, and they also have some new upgrades to their software. I think they can track now occupancy reports and things like that, which is helpful data. But Tract is helpful in that it makes things a lot faster, right? So you can go into any given market, you can type in your criteria so it knows what to search for, and it just shows you where they all are. And you can you could download those lists. I think they'll also give you the owner information, things like that. And then you could just start reaching out to them, cold calling, or you know, for me, because I'm also running the storage rebellion, I have a VA do that for me now. Um, but like Tract's helpful. I also try to push people towards relationships. We talked about this earlier, but like reach out to as many brokers as you can and property owners as you can, and just start building those relationships. I like to look at occasionally I'll look at like listed deals and things like that. And I'm always just connecting with brokers. And I touched on this earlier, like I want to add value to them as well. I'm not just looking to buy properties from them. If there's an opportunity where I or the Storage Rebellion can support them, that's what we try to do. And I think storage as a whole, right? And you probably have witnessed this, like it's a pretty giving community. Like a lot of people
totally.
help each other, support each other. And so we like to do our part in that as well and help as many people as we can. But yeah, dude, there's so many different, like I'm probably not the best person to give off a bunch of different tech products, especially because I'm not playing in them too much anymore. Like I said, I have a VA doing that. But
Yeah.
I do know Tract is it's pretty solid. I was using it for a while, and then I think there's like Google's. I don't know if it's called Google Scraper, but you can like scrape everything off of Google as well. And then you could just go buy a list. Like pick out a state that you want to own in. You can buy a list of every property in that state, and you can just start reaching out to them that way. Even Facebook Marketplace, like go
Yeah.
on Facebook Marketplace, do a search for self-storage in your hometown. You get a bunch of properties coming up. What I do like about Facebook Marketplace is that you can have a conversation with the owner and like that day. Like typically they respond relatively fast. So you can shoot them a message, introduce yourself, see if they have an interest in maybe selling down the road. And when I've done it in the past, those owners responded usually that day. And so I was having a lot of conversations relatively fast. And so I don't know if that's helpful or not, but definitely like
Yeah.
get started on Google, TractIQ, building relationships, things like that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, like Facebook Marketplace, Facebook groups, like they might feel like outdated in some aspects, but like that's where a lot of these folks are. And it's also where a lot of individuals, to your point, will respond in a reasonable time frame. So you can get a lot of reps and obviously
Yeah.
be thoughtful. But hey, like everybody's got to start somewhere.
Okay.
And whether it's mailers, online groups, Facebook Marketplace, you name it, there's there are rocks that haven't been turned over yet. So
Sure. Sure.
yeah, pretty exciting. And I think like as we kind of like wrap things up here, like what are the things that what does like long-term success look like for individuals in the storage rebellion, or just like individuals who are getting like what is kind of like the time frame that people should be looking at? Obviously, sometimes it becomes people drop off their W-2 and like go into it full time, but when people look at it from a time frame, how should they think about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It really depends on what your goals are, what your vision is, and how bad you want it. We've had actually quite a few members uh, pick up deals on their third and fifth cold call. We've had people purchase multiple deals within 90 days. And for others, it's taken 9, 12 months, some of them a year and a half, some of them 2 years. A lot of it, from what I've seen, comes down to how much time, energy, and effort they're putting into it. I will say it is a lot faster to do this when you have people around you who are doing this. Like, I'm a huge, huge believer, especially because I've lived it, but like community environment is everything. You will only rise to the level of your environment. So, like, if you want to be really successful in self storage, start hanging out with storage investors, right? You're going to be the product of the people that you spend the most time with. But also being around people who have walked this path. One of the benefits to it is they can not only help you move faster, but also challenge your thinking. There is 100 different ways to do a deal, and there's 100 different ways to structure a deal long term. There's 100 different ways to structure a business, right? And so, like, there isn't one answer, and this is like, once I figure out the one piece, I can just keep running with it, right? Like, there's always opportunities to grow. It's one of the reasons why we have the insiders group. You have folks in there who have portfolios worth $30 million, and they're still in these groups for a reason, right? Because there's always something new to learn. There's always a better way to do things. There's new ways to grow. And so, like, it it comes down to who you are, what you want to achieve. If you want to get a deal in 90 days, I believe that's absolutely possible with the right community, with the right training, with the right support. And most importantly, if you're going to be somebody who is committed to taking action, doing the work, showing up on a regular basis. And one question to maybe, as I'm saying this, I can imagine there's some folks asking, well, how much time do I need to dedicate if I want to be successful for it or with
Yeah.
it? And I've seen a range of people being successful with a couple hours a day. I've seen people being successful with an hour a day, and I've seen people being really successful when they're in that somewhere 10 to 30 hours a week. And in that time frame, like, what they're doing is they're locating opportunities or potential opportunities, and they're talking to as many people and building relationships with people as they can. I've had people tell me, well, this week I sent out 600 mailers. Like, I'm feeling really good about it, right? It's the most I've ever sent out. That's awesome. And I would say it's probably more beneficial, instead of sending out 600 letters, for you to focus on building 100 solid relationships, even 30 solid relationships. Because as I mentioned earlier, like everybody's going to sell at some point. That relationship is really, really important. If you send out 600 letters and you never talk to those people again, like, what? That's not good. That's not good. Like, that doesn't matter at all, right? Like, how many of those people know who you are that you've had a connection with or communicated with? That's most important. And so, like, and I know John, who runs our insiders group, he has a very small list, and John, his portfolio is $26+ million, and when him and I first connected, and he told me how many properties were on his list, I couldn't understand. This was years ago, and but what he does and what he does really well is he finds his ideal property. He builds that small list, and then it's just all about building strong relationships with those folks. And so, figure out what kind of deals you're looking for, what makes sense, value add, turnkey. Are you looking for low occupant? Like, what is your ideal facility? Start there. And you can figure that out based on your needs. So if you have a 9 to 5 and your goal is, hey, I want to leave this within 12 months time. Okay, cool. How much income do you need to replace that 9 to 5 job? And now let's reverse engineer and start looking for deals that can help us generate that income once we leave that 9 to 5 that we feel comfortable and safe with. So figure out what you're looking for, and then just find 100, 200 of those properties and just start building relationships. And once you've gone through that and you feel comfortable, you can start scaling from there, building that list, hiring VAs, whatever it might be. But the success you have really comes down to like your willingness and desire to achieve that success, take action, and be around others who can lift you up and point you in the right direction, who can answer your questions when you're feeling overwhelmed or maybe even stalling because you're not sure what the right move is. And you can have somebody say, well, actually, here's how to handle it. And here's why this is not as big of a deal as you think it is. And when they can open your eyes to that, it just makes it so much easier to move quickly. But, one last thing I'll say, if you're committed to doing the work and you put yourself in the right group and you take action, there's no reason why you can't do a deal in 6 to 12 months.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been super insightful and always a pleasure to have a chance to catch up with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me on, and looking forward to catching up with you and the team hopefully soon.
Sounds good.